ERP is a software which basically has all your different, modules or line of businesses working together. So it will have your order management, your supply chain management processes. It will have inventory management, procurement, accounting, finance, everything running in one system. And the best part about it is that all the information is centralized, standardized, and flows very seamlessly.
Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where we explore trends, current events, and innovations impacting the logistics and supply chain industries. I'm your host, Ellen Wood. Sustainability is no longer just a buzzword. It's a business imperative. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring how ERP systems are becoming the cornerstone of environmentally responsible operations. My guest today is Pratiksha Agarwal, and we're going to be discussing everything from data-driven decision-making to supply chain transparency and the circular economy. Welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. I'm looking forward to our topic today, but first, let's get to know you a little bit better. So our icebreaker question for today is, what is your favorite way to spend a rainy day?
Well, to be honest, I love rains, and when you have the rainfall and you get the smell of fresh mud. I really love the smell of fresh mud. So what I do generally on a rainy day is I will grab the window, or I'll go sit on my patio or something which is very close to the rain where I can enjoy the weather. I'll get cozy in a blanket or some sort. And then my mom, when I was a kid, she used to make these veggie fritters on a rainy day, especially with tea or coffee. And I would love to enjoy, like, I would love my tea, coffee with my veggie fritters, enjoy my rain, and then I'll listen to some music. That's my whole idea of just enjoying the rain.
Oh, I'm with you on the smell of rain. And I'm in the Midwest, and there's something I've heard it from a number of Midwesterners that we can smell rain coming. And I can. And I can't explain how I can or what it smells like, but I can smell it coming. But I love that freshly washed I don't know what it is, just that fresh water hitting the hot earth, especially in the summertime.
Yeah.
A
I
fresh
think it's
summer
mostly
rain.
the smell of mud.
It could be the smell of mud, but I agree with you. I want to open the windows. I want to open the doors. In my house, we have some skylights. And so it's really loud when it rains and you hear that noise. So I would actually, different from yours, I would not have music because I want to listen to the rain, but I will sit and read a book, and again, with the blanket, and curl up somewhere cozy and listen to the rain. And, let's see, I didn't have vegetable fritters, but I do love to make fresh bread. So I will put, even if it's a rainy day and I don't feel like actually making bread, I'll just put some ingredients in the bread machine and it will make the bread for me. And then I can have the snack. You get that smell of the ozone and outdoors and a smell of fresh bread. And it's just the perfect day. I agree. Rainy days are wonderful.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Now we just need rain.
Yes, now we just need rain along with food.
All right. So let's get to our topic today, which is ERP systems and what they're able to do for supply chains, and in a number of different areas, from sustainability to transparency of where product is, and even in the circular economy when it comes to, returns or recyclables and any of those topics. So you are an expert in ERP implementation. What is the first thing that our listeners need to know if they have not experienced an ERP system, if they're not one of these enterprise level clients? What's the first thing they need to know about an ERP system that is going to make the difference for their supply chain?
Yeah, so one of the things about ERP in a very layman terms is like ERP is a software which basically has all your different, modules or line of businesses working together. So it will have your order management, your supply chain management processes. It will have inventory management, procurement, accounting, finance, everything running in one system. And the best part about it is that all the information is centralized, standardized, and flows very seamlessly. So talking in the aspect of sustainability, it gives our stakeholders a clear picture or a centralized picture of what is coming in, how is it going, what are the different processes and steps, and then they can review all this, data, inventory, returns, processes, and figure out the, loopholes where they can improve sustainability, or they can take the corrective measures to make it more efficient and to make it more, nature friendly, environment friendly. So that's the best part about it, getting an holistic view, running everything together.
Exactly. So when you have all of the data for running the organization in one place, you're able to look at it through that holistic lens, see how it relates to other data within the system, to other business units, and really have a much more, I've already used the word holistic, but just a much broader view of what's going on in the
Bird's eye. I like
business.
to call it the bird's eye view.
The bird's eye view. Okay, I like that. So looking at the whole thing, but then getting into some of those areas, what areas have or tend to have the highest potential for those sustainability improvements? Is it in operations? I assume maybe some of it's in procurement, but where are those sustainability quick wins?
I think every area has, potential areas to figure out sustainability, like especially like starting from order management, right? We had one of our customers, and it was a big customer. I can't name them, but they had orders coming in from different sources and through papers, emails, through, faxes. So that involved a lot of carbon footprint, and they automated their entire process of taking orders. So they created an application, automated the entire process of taking orders. Even through phone orders, they automated it using, co-pilots, like certain AI co-pilots, chatbots and all, and made a easy way of automating all the orders and creating those orders in their ERP systems. So that reduced so many steps of, manual paperwork, manual entry, uh, that that really helped in reducing their carbon footprint, as well as freeing up their resources from manually entering the orders into the system. So every single line of business, whether it is order management, whether it is procurement, I'll give you an example of one of my other customers. They created a application on in the ERP system to check their suppliers against all these different sustainability regulations, and they were scoring their suppliers, and then they used to pick the supplier which has the least sustainability scored cost, and they used to rate it and pick those. So there are different ways you can optimize it. You can optimize the routes that your transports are taking to deliver the product through ERP, and figure out a much better route that will also save time, it will save fuel, it will save the cost. That there are, so every single line of business or every single area in ERP can be looked into to do our small bit.
So, what are some of the challenges in collecting and managing all that data when it comes to an ERP system? I mean, you were talking about building a form or an online order process. So, yes, now the data is coming directly into the system, and that's so much easier. But does that require a different program? You were talking about transportation management. Does a TMS have to be a separate, add-on sidecar piece of this, or is all of that inherently capable within the ERP systems that we have available today? I mean, we can talk about what they used to be able to do, and that's lovely, but it doesn't matter. What are they able to do today?
So that's a very important question. Like, supply chain is very complex, and the complexity makes it very difficult, to get the visibility and control over different aspects of supply chain. And data availability and accuracy is like at the top of it. So many companies struggle with having that visibility into their extended supply chain, particularly beyond their first tier of suppliers. So with multiple tiers of suppliers, tracing the sustainability data back to the original source becomes really complex. So each tier adds another layer of difficulties. So collecting data, verification process, gaining insight into the next level suppliers makes it very difficult and which is not very readily available. Some of the steps that suppliers or ERP implementers should take place is make sure that the data is available, collected, it's accurate. Like you can have different automations, like I said, to clean the data and make sure, because it goes hand in hand. Your data availability and data accuracy needs to be on point in your ERP system. The second I would say is regulation and compliance is another challenge, right? With an increasing number of regulations and standards, sustainability can be really overwhelming for companies to keep track of or comply with it. So different regions can have different regulations, different standards. Some suppliers might be reluctant to share the data due to concerns about confidentiality, competitive advantage, or require it could also require a lot of effort in collecting and reporting the data, right? So that is another challenge. Then one of the most common things which I have come across in different customers is fragmented information across different regions or different systems. That further complicates collecting and integrating the data. Like there is inconsistent sustainability reporting standards and data quality issues, such as incomplete or outdated information that can again lead to inaccurate or inconsistent data. These suppliers can vary in size, they can be in different locations, they can have different technology capabilities, which can lead to standardizing the data collected from these different areas, and then collecting it and making sure that the entire data is standardized. And obviously there is technology constraint. That is another challenge, right? Not everyone would have tools or platforms to easily collect those data or integrate those data into their existing system so that they can then evaluate the data. And cost, we can't leave cost out of that. That is like the biggest challenge companies have. Like they might not have the finance or the sources to invest in these type of technologies, or even resources. You need to train your resources to know how to collect the data, verify it in a consumable form. So on a high level, these are the basic set of challenges which I generally encounter in most of my customers or clients.
So, what are some data accuracy or completeness issues that you've seen? Um, I, I mean, we're talking about mountains of data that could potentially be input into this master system to be able to orchestrate whatever is needed within the company. That's significant. There have to be some very strict and stringent guidelines for what this data is and isn't, and making sure that accuracy is in place. Not only accuracy, but completeness, that you have every single piece of data, because as soon as you're missing a piece of data, then that entire data line is irrelevant. It can't be counted. So what are some, I mean, other than you just mentioned the financial challenge of having the resources available to compile and clean the data, what else makes it so difficult to implement an ERP system?
uh, First of all, what makes it difficult to implement an ERP system is the fear of unknown, right? A lot of customers or clients don't know how they have to learn a new technology, right? And they also have to learn how to give the requirements. The first hurdle block that I have mostly faced during my customers is they don't know how to give the requirements. So as consultants, it is from us to get the requirements from them. And also training, right? Change management is another important aspect that goes hand in hand. They fear that these new tools or technologies might take their jobs or roles away from them. You have to be empathetic with it. You have to ease them that this will not take job roles away. In fact, this will help you in to do your job much more effectively. Train them how to use the systems, right? So there needs to be a change management in place to help them ease how to use the system. So those are like some of the common things which I've encountered. Change management, learning how to use the system. And also ERP can be a very good tool, like you said, right? Data, how can we standardize the data? Like in ERP, you can collect the customer or supplier information, and you can make sure that these are certain important fields that has to be put in. And a record or a supplier cannot be saved without entering these exact information or these important fields. So that way you can make sure that there are certain, the important information is there in the system, or you can put certain checks automat to check whether no one can enter a random postal code. The postal code should be within this list of codes. So those are certain things that you can handle on data verification or data entry, where automatically while you're creating the data, you can make sure certain checks are in place.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that once you've implemented the ERP system and you have all of these things in place, these forms, these collection points in order to standardize the data, that's one thing. But when you're looking to implement a new ERP system, as a lot of clients are these days, to try and get this bird's eye view of their organization, they have to go back to old data and they have to clean it. They have to scrub it. They have to append it. They have to make sure it's all in the same format. What are we talking about in terms of, number one, resources and time? I don't even know if you can give me a standard answer to this, because it's going to be different for every organization. They're going to have different holes. They're going to be different sizes. But I mean, what is a typical expectation of how much lift are we going to have to get our old data up to speed in order to work?
So yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, and yes, I actually don't have an accurate answer because timelines differ from customers to customers, and also how messed up their previous legacy system was. To be honest, so a lot of customers do have all these basic information already available in their old legacy system, whether they are using it in a different format. And generally, there are these different tools that help to migrate the data from the previous tool to the other tool. Obviously, we need some resource from the customer side who knows the system. For example, or order management or customer management team on the customer side needs to work with the customer migration manager on the new ERP system, right? So those two technical people work together. They collect the data. They make sure that the data is in one format, and then they can migrate it to the other. And then these are all these systems. So if the data is in place, migration becomes easier. So yes, cleaning the data definitely takes time, and it, like I said, it goes back to my previous point, how much time or resources the organization is ready to spend. I have seen organizations who are very good at it, who already have their act together. They have cleaned the data or started working on cleaning the data. They know till which point of historic data they want to load in their new ARP system, and the remaining historic data they will archive. So that really helps with their game. And to put a proper, yes, it can take, I would say, a few months. I would say generally I've seen like 1 or 2 months on, if you are working dedicatedly on this project, 2 3 months to easily transport, clean the data, and move it from one system to the other.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of supply chains out there are still, to this day, and it makes me cringe a little bit, they're still running all of their operations using Excel. Excel is a wonderful tool, but it is not an ERP system. And so I guess that gives our listeners who are considering an ERP system a little bit of a benchmark to say, look, if I'm not sure that my data is ready to go, that's something I can be doing, even as I'm exploring the possibilities, looking at different vendors, trying to decide which particular software is the best fit for our organization, is to start cleaning the data. Whatever the data is, start cleaning it. Make sure it's consistent, make sure that it is complete, and then you'll have a better time with that customer implementation team that's going to be requiring that data.
Of course. Yeah.
And possibly eliminating some potential delays, because I know that is typically something that we see in projects where we have to collect data from the client, is they were just completely and wholly unprepared for what it is that would be needed when they came to us and said, we have this project we want to do. And we say, okay, first you're going to need the data about this, and whether it's their order data or their transportation data, whatever it is, going back and making sure that everything is clean is one of the most time consuming steps in most projects.
I would say, and this is also a step that can bring down the entire ERP implementation. Yes, that is very true. I do remember walking into clients where we had gathered all the requirements, automated all their processes, but just because they were not ready to clean their data, we had to call off the project, take a step back, give them time to clean up their data, and then go back in again. So I have seen that could be a major. And on a second note also, I remember, like, if your data is not clean, no matter how good the processes are going to be in the new ERP system, you will not be able to benefit out of it, because everything is driven from the data. All the analysis that you would be doing, all the decisions that you would be taking, will be from the automation that is running on that data. So if the data is not clean, no matter how good of a job you've done in automating the processes or digitizing your ERP systems, it's not going to work efficiently.
Absolutely. Let's do that louder for the people in the back. If your data is not clean, you can't automate processes with it. Because I think that's one of the things that really catches organizations by surprise is they want these automated processes. They want to simplify the work that they're doing. They want to simplify it so that they can have a better time with labor. There's labor constraints right now. There's a talent shortage. They want to achieve some of these sustainability goals with not having paper and faxes and things. There are so many things that organizations are trying to do within that automation of different processes, and they don't realize that you can't automate a process that has bad data. It won't work because you're just going to get the wrong results.
Yeah, you're going to get the wrong results, and then you have to redo the entire thing manually yourself.
And you've probably made some bad decisions along the way based on those bad data and bad results. So it's really a cautionary tale and super important to understand the absolute importance of clean and accurate data before moving into any automation, whether it's an ERP or any other system that we're looking at. So one thing that I did want to ask, because we've talked a little bit about sustainability and using that system in order to create some of those processes that allow them to increase their sustainability adherence, whether it's an external regulation. There's a lot of legislature that's taking place across the world right now, trying to improve sustainability and improve our carbon footprints. So what are some examples of how they've used an ERP system in order to create that sustainability to a degree that it makes that a differentiator for their business?
Yeah. So, for example, companies like, I would say, Johnson and Johnson or Unilever, they have actually used ERP systems to streamline their supply chain. They are monitoring, different environmental impacts. They have certain checkpoints, certain key metrics that they track themselves against. They are also monitoring how these how their suppliers are impacting the environmental. They are kind of rating their suppliers to make sure. And these companies are focusing on using ERP to improve their sustainability practices, enhance their reputation, be considered as one of the responsible corporate employee companies, I would say, not employees. Yeah, that can be appealing to both their customers and investors who prioritize sustainability over environment. And they are doing by, like I said earlier, they're looking into different areas of their business processes, whether it is optimizing the inventory or optimizing the return management process, or figuring out better transportation routes to deliver the products, or automating order management processes. There are different areas that they look into to optimize their small bits of business processes, which eventually make a huge impact.
It's so interesting to me to learn how much of supply chain actually impacts other areas of the business, and in ways that maybe seem logical or second nature. But when we're talking about some of these sustainability goals, well, like these large enterprise organizations, like you mentioned, they have a sustainability officer, a chief sustainability officer who's sole position is there to make sure that they're making improvements in these areas, but then to go back and see how much of that can be driven and affected by things like, which supplier are we using to order, this component or this packaging, or how are we sending out, or how are we receiving these orders. It's going to make a huge difference. And I love that the ERP solution is able to pull all of that into the one area, into the one database that's going to help all of those decision makers across that organization, across that C-suite, able to see the same things and talk about these things using the same language. So they're looking at the same data, they're finding the same things, but from their own perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. They're optimizing all these processes based on their company's requirements.
And one other thing I wanted to ask, because you mentioned a couple companies that I'm sure all of our listeners have heard of, and these are major global conglomerates. Of course they use an ERP system. Of course they do. But is there a basement to that? Is there a minimum requirement in terms of size to where an ERP is just not going to be the best solution, that something smaller is obviously going to be less expensive? I mean, we can use cost as the determining factor, but at what point is there just not enough data input for an ERP system to make sense?
Yeah, so I think it is dependent on certain important factors, and there are reasons why companies don't go or implementing ERP. First is it is high initial cost. Like implementing an ERP system can be expensive. It will involve like significant upfront cost, whether it is software licensing, hardware, customization. So small businesses or startups will have limited budget, and financially it might not be the right choice for them to go ahead and implement a big ERP system. That would be one reason. The second thing, like I said, it's the complexity and the time consuming implementation, right? If companies are not looking to if their businesses are straightforward, and they don't really need, so they don't have such complicated supply chain management processes or order management processes, then implementing an ERP would again be very time consuming, and which they can easily still get their work done by using simple Excel files or those. So I think that is another concern. That could be another reason why small companies should not would not go for it. Inadequate IT resources, like ERP requires ongoing maintenance, it requires updates, it requires support, it requires resources, to be working on the ERP system to help you with it. So if you don't have the enough resources, or you don't have the right amount of resources or the budget to scale your teams, then ERP, obviously, that was the other reason I have seen generally in my experience why companies choose not to go for ERP systems. Generally, small size companies or startups would not implement ERP until they have reached, like to a mid-sized company, or the business process has become so complicated that they can implement an ERP, and then it will make sense for them.
Okay. Well, no, that's good for our listeners to understand that it's not a one size fits all solution. This is a big solution, and it is robust, and it is capable of a lot of things, but it is not the perfect solution to every organization's supply chain and management woes. And then I guess my last question would be, you've implemented a number of ERP systems for customers all over the world. Okay. What is your most interesting implementation story? Doesn't have to be the whole story, but what is one of the favorite things that happened during an implementation that you will never forget?
Okay, I was working for this company, which is a pretty big company for US. It's in life science, and they used to produce all these materials for different hospitals. They had sales reps that used to deliver these products to a hospital, and it included everything, like small bones to skulls to teeth to everything. So I think what made me interesting is like you never really get into a place where you can see all these getting manufactured apart from the ERP implementation. So that was definitely very exciting to me to see how the entire life cycle management process works. And trust me, it's so complicated. Making sure small details are taken care of, because all of these things that they were manufacturing in their organization was impacting hospitals. So you can't make errors there. There cannot be defects in their products or their supply chain. So I think from the ERP implementation for us, being consultants, one implementation could be the other from the business process, but knowing what difference they are making to the world made it very fascinating for me. Learning their whole entire business became actually a learning experience from for me as well. And in this whole process, I also learned, I think particularly what was very interesting for me is how they wanted to optimize their, especially their what do you call, inventory management and return management processes, especially to cater to, to make their business processes much more efficient, to make sure that all these products are easily reaching the hospitals, the doctors, the patients as and when they require it. So I think that became very interesting to me, and also a learning experience on how they wanted to, make this change to track their inventory levels, make sure that product they can, get a view of their product movements in real time so that they can stay on top of their products getting delivered to hospitals, to patients, to doctors, because they were in such a demanding industry. And also making sure when they were getting these return management uh, returns back from their customers or from their vendors, and if there was an issue, how can they make sure to quality check on these returns? Like they had to quality check whether the returned material was returned just because it was not being used by the hospital anymore, or they didn't require it because of the oversupply, or was it getting returned due to a defect manufacturing? And in case it was returned due to a defect manufacturing, how can they correct the defect and reuse the product? And if that cannot be reused, how could they scrap of the product, making ensure that they are not creating environmental hazards? So I think that project for me, all in all, was a big learning experience, especially from being a consultant, that we were not just implementing the ERP to do inventory control, return management, or customer or supplier integration, but it was really good to see how, as a company, they were trying to make sure that they, apart from, serving hospitals, doctors, and patients, they were also keeping an eye to make sure that they are being, good corporate a good corporate company, to make sure environment is not impacted, carbon footprint is reduced, and sustainability can be achieved as much as possible.
That I agree. It's so interesting to go into some of these organizations, that brands that we're all familiar with, and seeing how they do what they do, how they deliver the products that we are used to seeing in an end result, or maybe we're not even used to seeing them when it comes to something like medical devices. That's not something I'm going to go into the store and pick up off the shelf, but when I need it, when my doctor needs that, then I need it. And it's so interesting to see the way the supply chain impacts all of our lives. But I agree, it is especially gratifying to be a part of that improvement, a part of that change for that organization, to help them do what they're doing and try to achieve their mission in a faster, more efficient way.
Yeah, I agree. That was definitely a gratifying experience for me.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Pratiksha, thank you very much for joining us today and all of your insight into the implementation of ERP systems. And I will have your LinkedIn in our description for the podcast. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you and ask you more questions about this, they know where to reach you. If our listeners out there have a suggestion for a topic or would like to be a guest on the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can contact me at podcast@mebach.com at any time. As always, thanks for listening to Speaking of Supply Chain. If you enjoyed our show, please rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you prefer, and be sure to tune in next time.